I had two interviews. One had a pre-reading, but it was sent to me 24 hours before. So I had like plenty of time to like research things and read about things and like read around the topic, think about potential questions, etc. And then my second interview was more of like a mathematical, logical, computer science, like what you'd expect basically from a Cambridge interview. Overall, I think it was a cool experience. It was nice. I think I was a bit stressed though. Like some of the questions they did grill you a bit, but it wasn't like anything. I don't think that was too out of reach of like the A-level scope, if that makes sense.
I was really nervous. They were like both pre-reading, and I'd kind of been prepared not for pre-reading and for like kind of mathsy questions. So I think I was quite thrown when I got the email with like, here's your pre-reading material.
For both of us, it was in person. So I got to travel down and stay the night, which was a really great experience. So I was really, really nervous at first because I really wanted to get in. But as soon as I got there, they made me feel really relaxed. They presented me with a maths logic question at first. And then in the second question, I had a programming question. And then after that, they asked me a bit about my personal statement, which I wasn't expecting.
I didn't do computing at A-level, and there were times where they used keywords that I didn't understand, but I was able to ask them, oh, could you just explain what this means to me? And then I was able to approach the questions just fine. And my interviewers were really, really friendly.
They were a lot friendlier than I was expecting, and I really felt welcomed. As I got into the questions, I became a lot more relaxed, and at the end, looking back on it, I really, really enjoyed myself. I ended up forgetting it was like in an interview setting.
I was a bit different because actually going into the interview, I was not sure that I wanted to study at Cambridge. So going in, I wasn't very nervous, but I enjoyed it so much that coming out, I felt like, first of all, that was really fun and it went pretty well, but also like I really wanted to study here.
But to add to that, I don't think everybody thinks that they did well in the interview after they came out.
I thought I didn't get in.
I kind of thought I'd like done the best that I could,
Same.
but I didn't. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was enough. But I think I kind of went in with the expectation I had to know everything.
Yeah.
And you actually don't. So
You don't, because like sometimes they like fill in the gaps. They'll ask you like, oh, do you know? I think in one of my questions they asked a question and they said something along the lines of like, oh, have you heard of this before? Have you seen this before? And I hadn't, so they basically just filled in a bit of context to help me like answer the question. So it's not the end of the world if like you haven't covered everything that they could possibly ask, because they're at the end of the day they're trying to just see how you answer and how you think. It's not necessarily about what you know right now.
The main skill that the interviewers want to see is if you can solve problems and how you solve problems. They don't necessarily care too much about the answer you get or how quickly you get it, but they want to hear how you think and what you're thinking.
Yeah. It's not about knowing everything at the start. It's really about getting stuck and then being given feedback and then sort of finding a way through that.
A specific skill that they look for is how you react to them giving you a hint, or how you react to them giving you a prompt on how to solve the problem. One tip I would have for specifically the interview day when you have the Zoom link, if it's online or if it's in person, try and make extra measures to make sure that you're on time. So for me, like I was in the call waiting like 5 minutes before, just in case anything technical slipped me up.
So I watched quite a lot of YouTube mock interviews to kind of see what it'd be like, so I knew what I was going into. So after that, I just kind of worked through a lot of maths questions and then kind of explained them out loud to myself. Like, even though it seems silly, just talking about what you're doing is really good to try and get that communication across.
Practicing that skill of fully going through your reasoning before you even write anything down, sort of saying what you're thinking, was one of the biggest things I was probably doing. And I think, yeah, especially in that like week leading up to it, probably whenever I was doing work, I was sort of trying to at least sort of mumbling to myself what I would have said if this was like an interview question.
And then also, my school, only 4 people applied to Oxbridge, so they didn't do any sort of interview training. So the teachers offered it to me, but it would also be worth asking other teachers to see if they'd be able to run through a few questions with you, because it's more about like having somebody to talk to explain your answers to.
Going over like your personal statement, I think was something that was key.
I did that, and there was like a thing that I'd written about that I'd learned ages ago. And I literally just mentioned it by name, and then in the interview they asked me about it. And I remember thinking, like, I was so lucky that I checked that over.
Yeah, because like I literally printed out a copy of my personal statement. I just like annotate anything that they could bring up. Like literally, like if I mentioned even the tiniest thing, like I went in and like read about it or watched about it, or like I tried to make sure that it was like on the top of my mind, fresh in my mind. So in the off chance that they asked about that tiny bit, which I think they did in my interview, like I was able to like cover it.
One piece of advice I would give to people applying this year for the interview would be to try as much as possible to stay calm. It feels like a very high-stakes situation. Like it's a big part of the process in deciding on where you're going to spend the next 3 years of your life. But then one thing to take into account is, one, the interview is just one part of a big holistic process that Cambridge uses to decide if they're going to give you an offer or not. And two, there's plenty of people that don't make it to Cambridge, but they're perfectly successful in other places.
Like obviously I was really stressed before my interviews, and you will be nervous, but try not to let that hold you back.
You don't want to sort of get so flustered that you can't really think of anything, because I think as long as you're calm enough that you can collaborate with the interviewers, you're gonna do perfectly well. And yeah, I think we said it 1,000 times, but the think out loud thing I think is one of the biggest things. I think one of the worst things would just be to sort of sit in silence, because then the interviewers don't know how to help you.
I'd say in the interview, kind of don't be scared to ask for help.
I
I think you kind of go in thinking you need to know everything, but really what the interviewer wants to know is kind of how do you learn, what do you do when you get stuck? And it's more about kind of your learning process and whether the Cambridge learning style would be suited to you, rather than what do you know right now. Because if you knew everything right now, you wouldn't need to come here. I think kind of like, don't try and put on a character of what you think a Cambridge student is. I think a lot of people kind of do that, and you'll find that when you come here, there are people here from everywhere. And like, yeah, you don't need to kind of like fake what you think a Cambridge student is. You just need to be yourself. And
yeah, just be yourself.
That's
Like, I think that's the most important thing.